Hey everyone, welcome to an exciting episode of BioLogic Science News. Today, I want to talk about Enceladus, that mysterious moon of Saturn covered in a crust of ice. Enceladus is believed to host a subsurface ocean of saline liquid water, which sometimes gets sprayed out into space along the moon's southern polar region. There's a lot of evidence that suggests that the subsurface ocean on Enceladus might be potentially habitable for life, including the trace amounts of CO2, ammonia, and methane that's found in the water plumes that get blasted out of the cracks in the surface. Furthermore, hydrogen was also found in these geysers, suggesting particular chemical reactions between water and minerals somewhere deep below the surface. However, it takes energy to push these hydro-mineral chemical reactions through to completion, so researchers had to account for where that energy was coming from. The first idea was to consider tidal heating, which is the heat generated when gravity warps and squishes a planet or a moon. Enceladus is a moon of Saturn, and it's in an orbital resonance with the moon Dione, each of which induce a gravitational tug on Enceladus that distorts it and generates heat. But this heat just isn't enough to account for all of the missing energy. By utilizing a behemoth complex of mathematical equations, the researchers computed another model that analyzed everything from porosity, permeability, and material strength of the core to the viscosity, temperature, and convective capacity of the water flowing through it. The gravitational and physical data that we have on Enceladus can best be explained, the researchers argue, if the moon has a rocky but porous core, and that water flowing through the core can generate heat through liquid tidal forces and carry this heat out into the greater global ocean above the core. Specifically, the heat flow is isolated to a few interlinked channels in the southern polar region of the core, which leads to the localized temperature spikes at the South Pole, and thus the geysers there that blow water out into space. But the exciting part is that this heat-generating mechanism is stable and powerful. It's so stable that it's strong enough to keep the ocean liquid and relatively warm for potentially billions of years. This is good because Enceladus is very young, perhaps too young to have generated its first life forms. Life on Earth formed a few 100 million years after the Earth itself formed, but this life was exposed to a much hotter Earth, with a very different atmospheric composition than the Earth does today. That old, volcanic, magma-covered proto-Earth is also a lot different than Enceladus, which is a relatively cold ocean world wrapped in a glacial crust. Enceladus, today, is only 100 million years old, so by an Earth timeline, any potential life there would probably just be single cells. However, liquid water is very conducive to life, and Enceladus is estimated to have more liquid water than the Earth does. Add to that the fact that Enceladus isn't being pounded by asteroids and meteors for millions of years like the young proto-Earth was. I would suppose that it's theoretically possible that life on Enceladus could evolve faster than life on Earth, that it could develop multicellularity and greater complexity faster than life on Earth did, just because the conditions on Enceladus are probably a lot less extreme and a lot less unpredictable than those of the early Earth. Although you could also make the argument that Earth's relative proximity to the Sun gave it an exposure to ultraviolet radiation, which is mutagenic to DNA, and this promotes mutations and diversification, with that unstable environment actually being a kind of evolutionary stimulant that life actually wouldn't have evolved and diversified as it did if we didn't have these kinds of environmental pressures affecting the earliest cells, the earliest life forms. So it's hard to say what life on Enceladus, how that life would evolve, because Enceladus it's exposed to so many different conditions. The temperature is different, the water quality is different, like the water salinity, the water temperature. It's all different. There's a surface crust which blocks out almost all light, even ultraviolet light. Add on to the fact that ultraviolet light is relatively weak anyway from the sun being so far away. There's all these variables you've got to consider. But if we were to go with the more interesting hypothesis that life on Enceladus would evolve faster because conditions might be more stable there, then perhaps there's a small chance that Enceladus has compressed 3 billion years of earthly evolution into the span of just 100 million years. And our future explorers to the deeper solar system will find that Enceladus has a subsurface ocean rich with fantastically complex, multicellular life. Although that's a pretty big perhaps.